Hello, can you hear me? Can all of you hear me? Is the recording voice okay? Okay, so welcome all of you. I'm happy to see you out. This is probably one of your earliest in-person classes, not classes, something else, after a very long time. But it's really nice to see all of you sitting here. What we are going to talk about today is a little bit of an orientation about a new department that has come up in IISER. You must have heard about this when you were at home, or perhaps some of you are already here when this was announced. And like any academic department in the institute, this department also has a teaching agenda, research agenda, etc., etc. But as some of you might realize, that this is a very different department from the usual departments, which for the sake of this lecture, I'll just call them departments of classical science, just to distinguish it from the science education department. So let us just begin by by some points to ponder about, which you might or might not have come across in the past. Okay, so here are a few things. Just have a look and give it a little bit of a thought. Okay, have you had a good look at this? Yes or no? Okay. All right. One more. So how many of these points have you either thought of or come across or have been told at some point in your lives? Many times. Okay. Which one? Okay. Okay. That's almost like, sentence carved in stone, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. How many of you actually observed the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Come on, somebody must have. Someone of you must have. You have? And did you find that it actually does? Yes? There's some shift, right? Okay. So, or even the last part. In school, that is told to you so many times that you actually start thinking it's a rational number. Right? And when somebody comes and says, no, this is not this. Oh, no, this is what we've been told. Pi is 22/7. So there are many things. Some of these are my own imagination, but it's possible that you too have imagined something similar. Okay, so in both of these sets of statements that we have just looked at, if you reflect a bit, you will find that these or similar statements are made very often when we learn science. And I mean, these statements probably might be more relatable to your school years, but the situation may not be very different in later years either. Okay. Now, why is this so? Any ideas? Any thoughts? We tend to accept these, right? I mean, at least some of these, until maybe 10 years later, you think, oh, maybe that was not quite correct. So what I want to point out is that some of these things are told to us, and some of these things might be our own ideas, which develop without anybody helping us, without reading any books, or without somebody telling us that it must be this or not that. Okay. So, for example, things like mountaintops should be hotter is something that many children think that, the closer you go to the sun, it should get warmer. Now, that's a very, very simple, naive way of looking at it, because if there's a fire nearby, you go closer, it feels hotter. You go farther away, it feels cooler. I mean, less hot. Okay. So you extend that logic, and then you might reach that conclusion. Okay. So fair enough. I mean, that's for a child, that's probably a reasonable thing to say. But you know that now that you are at a much more mature level, most of you, I think, will be able to think through these and realize what the fallacies in these statements are, or at least realize that these statements might be correct in a very limited sense. Okay. So these are the kind of questions that from the selection of the statements also, you'll realize that these are not in any way restricted to a particular branch of science. They're fairly common across all branches of science. These kind of misconceptions, these kind of ideas that people build based on their experiences, based on what they themselves construct, and so on. Okay. Now, science education is really a discipline that deals with such questions. How are ideas formed? How should things be taught? What is the best way of teaching? What are the factors that influence what students learn or how students learn? What ideas work? Which ideas don't work? If you are building a concept, what are the various different ways in which a concept can be presented or arrived at? Okay. So these are really various facets of education, of particularly science education, which require not only an in-depth knowledge of that particular classical discipline, but also requires much deeper, much nuanced understanding of psychology, social factors, language issues, and several other things. So, you can, if you think hard enough, you will find that some statements are easier to make in a particular language than in a different than another language. Okay. Now, I am told that there are some 7 terms for ice in the Eskimo, in the Inuit language. We have only 1. So the accuracy that an Inuit requires in describing different kinds of ice, perhaps because it is useful to him or her in many different ways, just tells you that how your language shapes is also a reflection of what your environment is. And the same actually does stretch out to topics in science, or at least understanding topics in science. Okay. So these are various aspects which are not generally covered in a science curriculum. If at all, they are very fleetingly covered. And we are also, up against this clock, which is trying to force all past developments in science into a gap of 10, 12, or 15 years. Okay. So there is probably not much time to reflect upon all these nuances, reflect upon history, reflect upon how concepts build, and so on. Okay. So the science education stream, the field of science education, tries to address all such questions. Okay. Now, in India, this is a very little developed branch. There are not many places where a serious study of these aspects is done. There are a few institutes, but for a country which is the size of India, this number is really, really very small. Okay. The number of students who want to learn science is large, and our school curriculum, well, I don't want to use the word forces, but our school curriculum has science as an integral part, whether the child likes it or not. Right? So there is a huge gap between what people who plan curricula think is necessary and what actually happens in the classroom. And science education is a discipline that tries to maintain a balance between the two, tries to find best ways to meet somewhat conflicting goals. A child might not want to learn science, but, well, people who make policies, people who think about education, feel that it is important to learn science to some extent. And if you know this, our constitution actually includes this training in science or the building of scientific temper as one of the goals for every citizen of India. So, all said and done, this is one area which, although needs a lot of attention, has received very little attention in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. There are only a handful of institutions in the country where any work of this kind is done. And we feel that IISER Pune is very well placed to get into this domain. Now, what do we foresee ourselves doing as a department? So I would say there's one set of things that, like any other department, there would be some research agenda. There would be topics that would be researched. And given that this discipline, the discipline of science education, has a very strong and direct connect to what happens in the field. So when I say in the field, I mean the classroom or colleges or places where textbooks are written and things like that. Okay, so this is not research confined to a laboratory, but research out in the field where you actually interact with the teachers, you interact with the students, you interact with people who write books, and try and find out what works, what doesn't work, what is effective, what is ineffective. Okay. So that is one kind of research that this department would like to pursue. The other kind of research is where you start thinking about how the mind itself works, how people conceive things, how do other influences, non-science influences, so to speak, how does the social environment, how does the geographical environment influence the way people learn? So things related to psychology, cognition, to education in general, I mean broad brush education. Language, that's another branch of research which may not directly feed into, say, making better textbooks or better teachers or better students, but in the long run will help. I mean, these theories will help you build ideas and concepts in the field of education, just as research in theoretical physics helps you make better cell phones, for instance. So it's like in other disciplines, this progress is slow, and we are just going to make a beginning. But we are hoping that in, say, about 10 years' time or 20 years' time, we will be a department that will be recognized, and we'll have some say in how policy matters are decided, in how curricula are framed, and in how textbooks are written. Okay. All this requires a lot of, fairly heavy research. And this is, as I said, a very slow train. We'll just have to bear with that. Okay. Now, you're not here to listen to what is going to happen 20 years from now. Okay. You want some immediate things to do. And I'm glad that there's a good turnout, and I'm hoping that many of you will pounce on opportunities that will come your way in the next 1, 2, 3 years. So let me tell you a little bit about what we have thought for courses and degrees, which is actually of more direct relevance to you. Okay. You're, of course, welcome to discuss with all of us your ideas or your questions and so on. And there'll be many more opportunities in the months to come. So, right now, so these are not all very well crystallized ideas. These are somewhat more than preliminary ideas, but not yet formally set up. So we'll definitely have a PhD program in science education, like we have in all other disciplines. We will also have a master's level program. So it could be a blend of the BSMS or a master's program for those who come with a BSc degree. That those details still need to be worked out. But one of the things that is very likely to happen is that not your batches perhaps, but some of the batches to come might actually see an option of taking science education as a major. Okay, so we are still working out on the possibilities and trying to figure out what is the best way to do this. The reason why this is not so straightforward, tomorrow if a new chemistry department comes up, the chemistry department has a fairly clear idea of what kind of roadmap to follow. But this is a very different discipline. And this discipline, I mean, the people who come out of a degree, come out with a degree through this department, many of them would expect to work in the education sector. And the education sector is regulated. There are some norms that are there. And we'll have to make sure that our degrees are accepted, fit into the norms, and so on. And we also need to be very clear that we don't want students coming out of this to be just didactic teachers, but they should also be very good in a particular discipline and be good in teaching. Okay? Teaching meaning teaching and thinking about teaching. So, designing this curriculum, building this curricular structure, building the format of the degree, and so on, is a slightly more involved process than it would be for a classical discipline. We are working on this, and in about a year's time, we should be ready with all these programs. But the good news for you, the more immediate news, is that as early as this summer, we will be trying to make opportunities available for those of you who are interested in this field to actually go out and work with some of the practitioners. Okay? Spend your summer, maybe a month, 2 months, but at least a month, and go out there in the field, work with these experts, and learn little more with your hands, dirty your hands on the field, at the ground level, what challenges there are in science education, what kind of questions people ask, what kind of struggles people go through, what works, what doesn't work, and how the kind of questions that we listed at the beginning actually crop up, how those ideas come up. You might actually want to visit one of your school textbooks. Go back to your school, go through your textbook, sit with your teachers, well, not your teachers, but the teachers who are currently there, and figure out how better to do this if some of these questions bother you. Right? That's a possibility. And we are in touch with people who are in this field, and they have agreed to mentor, some of them have agreed to mentor such projects. And we will be spreading this word and finding out who would be interested in offering such projects. And those of you who are willing to give this a try, are interested in this, please get in touch with us, and we'll try to map you to things that you want to do. Okay. Then in the next semester, that means the August 2020 semester, we are also hoping to offer, well, not these many, but maybe 2 electives. I've just listed some possibilities. So this is a very tentative list. This list may be completely out of, removed from reality. You might see 2 other courses, not these 6. But we are planning to offer 2 courses as electives for the 5th and the 7th semester in August. Okay. So that would be another opportunity for you to get a feel for this. And then, over time, as we start recruiting faculty members, we will have a full curriculum in place. This is going to take time, but we hope to get there in about 2 years' time. Okay. So that's the general plan for the next semester and the next year or so. So 2 courses in the August semester and 2 more courses in the following January semester. Okay, that's by and large the plan. Now, even before that, even before we come to the summer projects, starting right next week, we're going to have a lecture every week by some experts in the field, who some of them will actually come here, some of them will talk to us remotely. But we are going to have these 4 lectures already. We have these 4 lectures already lined up in the coming month. And I'm sure that this crowd will stick on through this month and participate in these lectures, discussions, and so on. So the format of these lectures might be very different from what we are normally used to. Let's wait until the next week to see how they go. Okay. Yeah. Watch out for announcements. So I'll just introduce you to the team that is after this, that is behind this effort. Not all of us are here today. Pooja, she's from the humanities. Aparna is from physics. Supriya is from mathematics. Anirban from chemistry is one of our team members. And Joy from ECS is yet another member. I am the chair of this committee. You are free to talk to any one of us if you have any queries and questions. And keep keep an eye on announcements from us. Okay. So the very first announcement, which will come from Supriya maybe in a couple of days' time, well, about a week's time maybe, right, is about these summer projects. All right. And public talk announcements. Okay. So on on Wednesday 30th, we have a talk by, okay, so the IPL awaits you. I know this. In 40 minutes, you're going to have the IPL starting, so I won't keep you for long. But all I wanted to, I'll show you the thing if I can in a bit. But what I wanted to tell you about is on the 30th, which is the next Wednesday, at 5 o'clock, Jyotsna Vijapurkar from the Homi Bhabha Science Center is going to talk to us. And okay, so Jyotsna Vijapurkar was at Homi Bhabha Center and she's retired recently. She's an astronomer turned science educationist. Okay, so she has an MSc degree in physics, in astronomy, and then she switched over to doing researching in science education. And she and her team have built what they call small science, okay, a small science curriculum, which is a collection of books which they have developed by working very closely with municipal schools in Bombay. So that's the kind of work she's done. And I'll read out what her abstract is for the talk on the 30th. Okay. For a majority of science students, science as it is taught in our schools now is extremely challenging. There are several factors that contribute to this state of affairs. They include the curriculum itself, the classroom process, and the feedback mechanisms or lack thereof. In my talk, I'll discuss some of these factors and how they may be addressed. I'll draw heavily on examples from my own work in curriculum development. Okay. So she's going to be our first speaker. Then we have Abhijit Bardapurkar, who works at the Azim Premji Foundation, Azim Premji University. He's going to be talking to us on the 6th of April. Then on 21st and 22nd, which is going to be an in-person session, which are going to be in-person sessions, most probably. On 21st and 22nd April, we'll have Kamal Mahendru, who has been involved in the non-government sector education initiatives very heavily for the last 30 years. And Sadhana Saxena, who is from the Delhi University College of Education. Okay. And on 27th April, we have, these are again somewhat tentative dates, but 27th April, we'll have Ravi Subramaniam, who's currently at the Homi Bhabha Science Center and is a mathematics educationist. Okay. So we have a spectrum of people who will be talking about various things in science education, basically introducing us to the field, giving us an idea of what challenges there are, what kind of efforts are being, are underway in the country, and also tell us about why it is important that the younger generation gets into this field. Okay. So if you have any questions, the four of us are here, and you can write to us at any point of time. We will soon. We already have it. We have an email address for this group. You probably don't know it yet, but we'll send out the next announcement from there. The webpage will come up by Monday or Tuesday. And these lecture announcements will also be made. So all in all, in the next 4 weeks, we hope that your interest remains as it is today. And we see even more numbers participating in these lectures, and also see a good number signing up for summer projects. You can come and discuss these with us whenever you feel like. Okay. So thanks a lot. IPL awaits you. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we will be happy to answer them. Yeah. I mean, any questions, not. Okay. So, well, we can leave.